Please be seated. On the record, 19 CR 586 A and B, State of Ohio versus Daniel Groves and State of Ohio versus Jessica Groves. We were on the state's next witness. State may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. State would call Dr. Susan Brown.
Doctor, can you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, please have a seat. Ms. Hutchinson, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, if you would, please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for our record.
Susan Brown, B-R-O-W-N.
Okay. Where are you employed?
I'm a forensic pathologist. I'm employed at the Montgomery County Coroner's Office in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
I would just ask, she has a soft voice, if she could just speak up, please.
Yes, ma'am. Just speak up loud. You can scoot that chair forward a little bit if you'd like. Might help.
If you would, please explain to the members of the jury what your educational background is.
I have a biology degree, a bachelor's in biology from the University of Cincinnati, and then went on to medical school at Ohio University in Athens. Did a residency in pathology in Muncie, Indiana at Ball Memorial Hospital, and then did additional training in forensic pathology at the Montgomery County Coroner's Office in Dayton, where I'm currently employed.
Okay. And if you would, tell the members of the jury what certifications or licensures you hold.
Well, I have a license to practice medicine in the state of Ohio, and I'm board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, hematopathology, and forensic pathology through the American Board of Pathology.
And you said you've been at the Montgomery County Coroner's Office how long?
12 years.
12 years. Okay. If the defense wishes, I'll go into all of her publications and her. We could be here for a minute.
The state's offering Dr. Brown as an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
Correct, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we've had the opportunity to review her CV in this matter, and we would stipulate to, and we would agree that she's an expert without going into that in extensive detail. Thank you.
The court will find that Dr. Brown is an expert in the field of forensic pathology. Once again, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that means she is allowed to offer opinion testimony in her field. We continue, Ms. Hutchins.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, if you would, before we get to the facts of this case, explain to the jury what the coroner's office does.
So as a forensic pathologist, I perform autopsies to determine cause and manner of death.
And how is it that you, or the coroner's office, I guess I should say, receives referrals or evidence and so forth into your office?
So in Montgomery County, we have outside counties that will contract our services to perform autopsies for them, and Scioto County is one of them. So your coroner here, Dr. Adams, contracts with us to perform autopsies for your county. And when he has determined that an autopsy is necessary on someone from Scioto County, he calls us to let us know that he has an autopsy that he would like for us to perform.
Okay, so you perform services for coroners in Montgomery County as well as other counties?
Yes.
Do you know approximately how many counties Montgomery County services?
Numerous.
Numerous, okay. All right. Once the coroner delivers to you a body that they believe needs an autopsy, what do you guys do?
So we start by taking some photographs and documenting how the body looks as we have received the body, and then proceed on to take additional photographs after we have removed, clothing and medical type equipment to further document any kind of a natural disease or injury. And then next step is removing body organs to look for the same types of things, natural disease or injury, and all along the way taking notes and taking photographs.
Okay. And if there's any evidence that comes with the body, how do you guys log that evidence in and maintain it?
We do log anything in as evidence, and we will hold it in our facility until an investigating agency, the police, will either pick up the evidence or proceed on with the evidence in the way that they feel they need to further their investigation through, maybe a crime lab.
Okay. And are there documents that note or chart everything that comes into the office there and everything that you do while you're in the office working?
Yes.
Okay. So you would have an evidence sheet that demonstrates all the evidence that would have come in with the body?
Yes.
Okay. And then what type of documents do you prepare in regards to the autopsy itself?
So I take some notes while I'm performing the autopsy, and then from those notes dictate and prepare an autopsy report.
Okay. And do you also use the toxicology lab there at Montgomery County Coroner's Office?
Yes.
Under what circumstances?
We perform toxicology under for almost all autopsies that we do.
Okay. The evidence, let me go back to the evidence. Where is that stored?
We have an evidence room at the coroner's office.
Okay, and is that a secured location?
Yes.
Okay. How do you gain access to that area?
There are only a couple of people who have access to the area, and those few people who are employed at the coroner's office will gain access when law enforcement comes and picks up the evidence, and then we will maintain a chain of custody to show who came and picked up evidence.
Okay. Let me direct your attention to June 2019. Did you have an opportunity to assist in the investigation or actually to perform an autopsy on the body of baby Dylan Groves?
Yes.
Okay. How did you become involved in that case?
It is just random, really. On that day, this is the autopsy that, I just randomly was selected to do.
Okay. So the assignments in your office are random assignments?
Just random.
Okay. Let me hand you, it's going to be what's been marked as State's Exhibit 36 for identification. If you could take a look at State's Exhibit 36. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
How so?
This is the autopsy report that I prepared.
Okay. And included with the autopsy report is also a toxicology report,
Yes.
and then also an evidence log or inventory sheet.
Evidence that we submitted to the toxicology lab.
And is that a true and accurate representation of the services performed there at the Montgomery County Coroner's Office in reference to baby Dylan's body?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you, Dr. Brown, to explain to the jury what you received and how you received it. Just
So-
the initial package.
So we received Dylan's body in two milk crates that were put together, the open end put together, so open end to open end, and these milk crates were secured together by a chain with multiple padlocks, metal wires, and zip ties.
Let me hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 37 through 44 for identification. Doctor, if you could take a look through those photographs and advise the jury if you recognize them.
Yes,
Okay, how do you recognize them?
these are the photographs that we took during the autopsy.
Doctor, if you would, explain to the members of the jury what's depicted in this photograph.
So this is what I was describing, these two milk crates that are secured together with a thick chain, which is woven in through these handles to hold these two milk crates secure together. And then the chain is further secured by padlocks, and the other ends of the milk crates secured by metal wires and zip ties.
Judge, if you would give her the laser pointer so that she can identify what she's speaking about to the jury.
Okay, so here we have, the top of each milk crate, which would be open-ended, and then the bottoms. And then they are put together with this thick chain and multiple padlocks and zip ties and metal wires.
Okay. And from your report, did you document how many zip ties, padlocks, and metal wires were there?
Yeah, so there are 3 padlocks, there are 12 zip ties, and there are 8 metal wires.
Okay. If I could show you State's Exhibit 38 and ask you to explain what is depicted in that photograph.
So now we're looking at the opposite end of these milk crates, and you can see then that this metal chain is going around this entire structure. And you also are able to see a little bit of what is inside of these milk crates, and these are very large rocks.
State's Exhibit 39.
And so then this is the opposite side of this structure. So we're just kind of going all the way around as if you're able to walk around the whole thing and look. And so also then on this side, the same type setup with the chain and padlocks.
State's Exhibit 40.
And so now we've completed the circle here with the opposite end. And again, the chain. And you can see a little bit as to what is contained inside, which is, another structure here, in addition to multiple 18 large rocks.
State's Exhibit 41.
So this gives you a closer look at what I'm describing to you so that you can see here are multiple zip ties and these metal wires that I've been describing.
State's Exhibit 42.
Another wire.
Okay. State's Exhibit 43.
Here we have the chain, padlock, and a zip tie.
And State's Exhibit 44.
So in order to see what is inside of this structure, we proceeded to open the top by cutting the portion of the milk crates and sort of opening it up. And so that's what we're doing here in this picture, so that you can see that there is this structure here, which contains Dylan's body. Also these large rocks. And then in addition to that, there is this iron anchor type device that is over the top of his body.
And do you remove that whole package out of the milk crates?
Yes.
Okay. You continue to take photographs step by step of what you're seeing there.
Yes.
Why do you do that?
To demonstrate the extent to which his body is concealed.
This time I would ask the witness to identify State's Exhibits 46 through 55. The record should reflect and showing this to defense counsel.
So 46 through 55 in sections here.
46 through 55, yes. If you could glance through these photos and advise the jury if you recognize those photographs.
Yes.
Okay, and how do you recognize those?
These are the photographs taken during the autopsy.
And these photos are all true and accurate representation of what took place there in your office as you're performing this autopsy?
Yes.
So let me ask you about State's Exhibit 46 to begin with. What do you see there?
So here we have removed all of the contents of these milk crates. And so what we have here is on end, we are looking down on the top of Dylan, who is wrapped in multiple layers of plastic, and around all of this plastic is this iron anchor type device.
If you would explain photograph 47, State's Exhibit 47. 7 to the jury.
And so now we have just put it, the whole thing on the other side so that you can see just from another angle.
State's Exhibit 48.
We have now taken the anchor off, and so now we have numerous layers of plastic and duct tape wrapped around his body.
Okay, and so State's Exhibit 48 is mostly silver duct tape? Is that-
Yes, over the top of plastic.
State's Exhibit 49.
So now we begin to open this plastic, and we do this kind of layer by layer and find 6 different plastic items that are wrapped around his body and secured with duct tape, and the next one wrapped around his body and secured with duct tape over and over and over again. And so in these photographs, we have cut each layer, layer by layer, we have cut this open and begun to unwrap the structure, basically.
State's Exhibit 50.
And so now we're down another layer, which is different type of plastic with additional duct tape.
State's Exhibit 51.
And we're down to another layer of the same thing over and over and over again.
And it's not necessarily all the same plastic and duct tape, is that
It's
right?
not. Mm-mm.
Okay. State's Exhibit 52.
And we're down to now another layer of plastic and duct tape.
And in this photograph, you're starting to see some debris from outside somewhere?
There is debris and everything is wet.
State's Exhibit 53.
Another layer of plastic.
State's Exhibit 54.
So now we are down to a blanket. So this right here is a blanket.
And Dr. State's Exhibit 55.
There was another blanket, which was right here. And so now we are down to Dylan's body. And just the way that we have happened to open all of this plastic, what we're looking at is the back of his head and his back. So here's his head, okay, and it's the back of his head. Here's his back. This is his left arm. His right arm will be over here, and his feet will be down here. We just can't see them yet.
Before we move on, Doctor, did you all weigh that package before you started taking it apart, or do you recall?
I believe that we did. I don't recall what the weight of everything was, but I believe that we did.
Okay, all right. So if you would, tell the members of the jury how you proceed through the examination before we move on to the photographs.
So we continue to, take pictures every step of the way, and basically now we're going to remove his body from this structure and examine his body.
If I might approach the witness with State's Exhibits 56 through 60. The record will reflect when I'm showing this to defense counsel.
We approach.
Doctor, if you could take a glance through 56 through 60 and advise the jury if you recognize those photographs.
Yes.
How do you
didn't recognize those photographs.
Additional pictures taken during the autopsy.
First photograph is State's Exhibit 56.
So,
If you would explain to the jury what that photo depicts.
so now we're looking, we have flipped him over, and so now we're looking at Dylan and his face. The top of his head is very darkened, although his face is still normal tan white color. He is in a sleeper, and he has on a sleeper, a onesie, and socks, as well as a disposable diaper, and everything is soaking wet.
If you would explain to the members of the jury what baby Dylan weighs at the time that you get his body, what his length was.
He weighs 2,126 grams, which is about 4.5 pounds.
And how long was he at that time?
20.5 inches long.
State's Exhibit 57.
So now we have flipped his body over, and you can see the back of his head. Again, the back of his head, going down to his neck area here is very darkened. And then the rest of his body, again, with wet clothing.
State's Exhibit 58.
So now we have undressed him so that we can evaluate for injury or natural disease, any signs of natural disease. And so here we can see there is an area on the right side of his chest that is red. It's a bruise. Okay, the right part of his abdomen is a little grayish, greenish discoloration, which you can see when a body begins to decompose or break down just after a period of being deceased. He also has a red area on his left leg, which is a bruise, and a laceration or a break of the skin on his left arm.
State's Exhibit 59.
So this is a closer look at his face. This is our identification photograph. And again, you can see this very well kind of demarcated. You could almost draw a line where you have all of this darkening of his scalp, leading to right above the eyes.
State's Exhibit 60.
And here is his back, with the back of his head. Again, his scalp area very darkened in color. And then the right side of his chest is red with bruising, and left leg is red with a bruise.
As your autopsy progresses, you eventually look inside the body at these, at some of the things you've seen outside, and then identify things inside that you can't see from the outside. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. I would hand you State's Exhibit 61 through 67. to take a look at these photos and advise the jury if you recognize those photographs?
Yes.
Are those, again, continuation of photography that you're doing, having done there as you're doing the autopsy?
Yes, that's right.
You would explain the significance of State's Exhibit 61.
So this is his left arm. So just for orientation, his head is here. This is his left arm, his left hand. And this is the laceration or the tear of the skin of his left arm.
State's Exhibit 62.
So this shows you a closer look at his left arm, and what I have done is I opened his left arm so that I could demonstrate the fracture of the left arm. So this is near that area where it is lacerated or torn, the skin, and beneath that area.
Just for a second, if the record would reflect that the witness has pointed to her upper arm. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So beneath this area is a fracture of his humerus, which is just the bone of the left arm. And here is the bone, which is fractured.
And that's a complete fracture.
Yes.
Okay. State's Exhibit 63.
So now we're looking further down on his left arm. So this is going to be his left forearm area. His left hand is here. His left shoulder would be up here. And his left forearm is also fractured. You have two bones in the left forearm, the radius and the ulna. So both bones of the left forearm are also fractured.
Doctor, before we move on, let me hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 72 for identification. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
Okay, what is that photograph?
This is an x-ray that we took during the autopsy.
And does this x-ray demonstrate the fractures that you were just speaking of?
Yes.
Okay, so using the laser pointer, if you would identify those fractures on the x-ray for the jury.
So here we have his head. This is the right side of the body. This is the left side of the body. And this is the left arm with the fracture of the left humerus or the upper arm bone. And then here is a fracture of the left radius and ulna, the bones of the left forearm.
And doctor, is it accurate to say that those lower fractures are also complete fractures?
Yes.
You would explain to the jury what's depicted in State's Exhibit 64.
So this is his left leg, the left knee, and his foot would be down here. And so I have made this opening right here so that I can look at the bone inside. Surrounding this area, it is red because it is bruised.
State's Exhibit 65.
So here we can see the bone of the left leg. This is his left tibia or your shin bone, and it is fractured.
And again, doctor, would it be accurate to say that that fracture is a complete fracture also?
Yes.
State's Exhibit 66.
So we are getting ready to open his chest and abdomen area to examine his body organs. And here we are looking at the skin from the right side of his chest. And this area right here all of this red area is bruising of the right side of his chest.
And State's Exhibit 67.
So now we have already removed the organs from his body cavities, chest and abdomen, and now we're looking at his rib cage. Okay, so his head would be up here, his feet down here, and this is his spine running down the middle of his body, and these are his left ribs. And you can see that the ribs are nice, straight, smooth bones. And here we have on rib 6 a large nodular area, which is a large callus from an old healing fracture. And the same thing on rib 7 next to it, a large nodular area, which is a healing old fracture, left ribs 6 and 7.
Doctor, in your opinion, would these fractures have occurred at the same time the fractures that we just looked at occurred?
No.
Before we move on, let me show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 73. Ask you if you recognize this photograph.
Yes.
Explain to the jury what that is.
So this is another x-ray taken during the autopsy of his lower body.
And does this x-ray depict both some of the arm fractures and the leg fracture?
Yeah, so it's an x-ray of his lower body. His head would be here. This is the right side of the body, the left side. This tag here indicates to you that that's the left side of his body. His left arm, you see the lower arm here, which is the fractures of his left forearm, those two bones of the left forearm. And then here we have the left leg, and here is the fracture of that left tibia or that shin bone of his left leg.
Okay. And you said these fractures would not have occurred at the same time as the rib fractures we just looked at?
No, there's no signs of healing.
Okay. So that calcification you were just speaking of you don't see that here?
Correct.
Okay. Doctor, if you would explain to the members of the jury your internal examination of the baby's organs and what's there and what's not.
So the organs are decomposed. Just a normal process that you go through after death. And so the organs will sort of lose some of their weight, lose some of their integrity. So for example, his brain, when I examined his brain, instead of it being a nice firm structure where you can evaluate all of the structures within the brain, it was liquid.
What about the other organs in his body? His heart, his lungs?
They, while I did not find any evidence of any natural disease or injury, they were decomposing, same way the brain was.
Okay. Explain to the jury what sources you use to refer to toxicology.
So, under normal circumstances, you would want to use blood as your number one source that you would use to send something for toxicology to see what types of substances, drugs basically, are in the person's body. And then, blood and urine would be your top choices. But due to decomposition, I didn't have any blood for Dylan. I didn't have any urine to use. And so for his toxicology, we had to use liver.
So you would take a sample from the liver and forward that onto your toxicology department?
That's right.
Okay. Let me hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 68 through 71 and ask you if you can recognize these photographs. Doctor, do you recognize the photos I've just handed you?
Yes, these are additional autopsy photographs.
Okay. And what do these photographs depict generally?
These are showing his skull with fractures.
Okay. So if you would explain to the members of the jury what's seen in State's Exhibit 68.
So we have reflected his scalp away from the bone of his head, his skull. So we're looking down on top of his head, the bone. And this is the right side, this is the left side. And here we have a fracture on the right parietal skull. And here we have a fracture of the left parietal skull. So they're both on top of his head.
Okay, and about what is the size of each of those fractures?
The right side is about 2 inches, I believe, and the left approximately 1.
1 inch?
Yeah.
Okay. If you would explain to the members of the jury any other significance that you see in the difference, if there is a difference in these two injuries.
So the fracture on the right side, this longer fracture here, between the two pieces of bone that are fractured, there is some tissue formation showing some signs of healing. That is not seen on the fracture on the left side here.
Doctor, explain what we're seeing here in State's Exhibit 69.
So this is the same thing, just a closer look at the top of his head. This is the right side of the skull, and this is the fracture of the right side, and this is the one that has some tissue formation between those two pieces of fractured bone, showing some healing.
And State's Exhibit 70.
This is a closer look at the fracture of the left side of the head that did not show any signs of healing.
So would it be your opinion, doctor, that these fractures did not occur at the same time?
Yes.
If I could put these fractures up there closer together, could you show the jury what you're looking at when you describe signs of healing?
So, normally if a bone is fractured, the two pieces are going to be loose and not connected anymore the way they should be normally. And then as your body begins to help you and start to do some repair work, the ends will begin to be connected by some tissue. And that's what's happening with this fracture on the right side here.
Doctor, if you would take a look at State's Exhibit 71 and explain to the jury what we see there.
So we have removed the piece of bone from the upper part of the skull now, and we're looking on the inside of the skull. And so normally what you would see would be the structure of his brain, but due to decomposition changes, instead of seeing this nice, well-constructed construction of his brain, it's liquefied. And so it is really this liquid that is in here. And the liquid would normally be a tan white color because that's the color of your brain. And the liquid is pink.
What does that indicate to you, doctor?
I believe that blood was mixed in, making it a pink color.
Dr. Brown, is a brain bleed consistent with skull fractures of this nature?
It can be, yes.
Okay. And you said most of the organs are decomposing.
Yes.
Are you able to say from examining the baby's lungs whether or not he would have been alive or deceased at the time that he was placed in the well?
No, not from examining the lungs. So drowning is a diagnosis of exclusion, so you really would need to exclude everything else in order to come to the conclusion of drowning. And I can't exclude everything else because I have numerous injuries.
Doctor, if you would, explain to the members of the jury what you believe to be the cause of death and why you believe that.
His cause of death is homicidal violence of undetermined etiology, which basically means that all of the information that I have from scene investigation, from the autopsy, from the toxicology report, everything all points to this being a homicide. But the specific cause of death can't be determined because a typical exam could not be performed because his body was decomposing from being concealed and in water for months.
When you say the typical exam could not be performed and therefore you call the death homicidal violence by unknown etiology, does that mean normally you would say homicidal violence or gunshot wound or stab wound or
blunt force trauma?
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying to the jury that you just can't say exactly how this was caused?
That's right.
What method or mechanism caused it?
That's right.
Okay. Do you consider these injuries blunt force trauma or trauma?
Yes.
Okay. Let me hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 45. Ma'am, do you recognize State's Exhibit 45?
Yes.
Okay, and how so?
Another picture that we took during the autopsy.
And is that State's Exhibit 45 there on the screen?
Yes.
You would explain to the members of the jury the purpose and significance of State's Exhibit 45.
We took this picture to demonstrate everything that was contained in these milk crates. So at the far right of the screen here, we have the milk crates, and then on the left side, all of the rocks, the anchor, and all of the plastic and duct tape that had been contained surrounding Dylan's body inside of the milk crates.
And does all of this play a part in your opinion of this case?
Yes.
Okay, explain that to the jury.
This was a lot of work, a large extent to go through in order to conceal this child's body so that it would not be found.
Doctor, let me take you back for a second to State's Exhibit 67, which you identified as the rib cage and some fractures with calcification there. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your opinion that these injuries were caused while baby Dylan was alive or dead?
Alive.
Why is that?
Because they show signs of healing. That's the way that those calcifications are made. Your body's reacting to it. So it's a process that has to happen while you're alive.
Okay, doctor, in State's Exhibit 69.
This is the skull fracture on the right side.
Is it your opinion that baby Dylan was alive or deceased when that injury occurred?
Also showing signs of healing, so he was alive.
The remaining fractures, State's Exhibit 70.
The left side of the skull.
Okay. And then the fractures to his arm and leg.
Mm-hmm.
Is it your opinion that baby Dylan was alive or deceased when those fractures occurred?
Well, by just looking at the fracture itself, there are no signs of healing. So those fractures would either have to be made after death or at the time of death. So right at the time of death, so that his body would not have had enough time to begin a repair process of these fractures.
So the fractures, you're saying either he was deceased when they occurred or they occurred and he died so quickly that the body could not react.
Correct.
What type of reaction do you see in a fracture if there's time for healing?
Well, you begin by seeing blood, and then microscopically you can see inflammatory cells, and then something called granulation tissue. So basically tissue starting to form in this area to help with the repair process.
And you mentioned earlier, Dr. Brown, that there was bruising to his part of his arm and part of his leg.
Bruising to his left leg, a laceration of his left arm.
Okay, I'm sorry, bruising to his leg and his rib cage.
Yes.
Okay. Does that bruising indicate anything to you?
Well, it's likely due to blunt force trauma.
Okay. And then what actually causes a bruise?
Blood vessels are broken, and so instead of your blood being contained inside of your blood vessel, blood is escaping out into your tissue.
Okay. I think you mentioned earlier that you used a portion of baby Dylan's liver to forward onto toxicology.
That's right.
Explain to the members of the jury what results you received from your toxicology lab.
We found methamphetamine and amphetamine in his liver.
Do you make efforts to determine what the source of that could be?
You can't tell by looking at the toxicology results how the substance came to be within his body.
Okay. Did you review any records to try to eliminate possibilities of ingestion? Medical records?
Yes.
Okay. Explain to the jury what you reviewed and what you were able to eliminate.
I reviewed birth records and records from two pediatrician, basically well baby checks, and there was never any indication that he was ever prescribed any kind of medication or sick.
Okay. Was there any indication whether or not he was breastfed or bottle fed?
The records indicate that he was not breastfed, that he was bottle fed.
Okay. So he could not have obtained those substances through breast milk?
Correct.
Correct. what's going to be marked as State's Exhibit 74. Before I do that, Your Honor, may we approach the bench?
You may. Here in just of the jury here in just a moment, the prosecutor is going to discuss with the witness State's Exhibit 74, which my understanding are the crates that were shown in the earlier pictures. The remaining items from the coroner's office, because of their condition, the body matter that was on those items and the current odor associated with these items, the lawyers have agreed to substitute photographs in lieu of those items. So you will have the benefit of the photographs, but you will not have the benefit of the actual items during your deliberations. Ms. Hutchinson, you may continue.
Your Honor, if I could ask you just to open this bag, take a look inside, and tell the jury whether you recognize this item. You don't need to pull it out.
Okay. Yes, I recognize the milk crates that I examined during the autopsy.
I might have just a moment. Doctor, again, if you would tell the members of the jury what your opinion is as the cause of death to a reasonable degree of medical certainty.
Homicidal violence of undetermined etiology.
This time I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Mr. Stratton, you may cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good to see you again, Dr. Brown. Just have a few questions for you. Could you repeat for the jury, you took Dylan Groves' weight and measured him at the
Yes.
autopsy. Could you repeat again what that weight was and his length?
So it was 2,126 grams, or that is about 4.5 pounds, and he was 20.5 inches.
Okay, thank you. Also, we saw pictures earlier of his head. It was black.
Yes.
Is that bruising?
So I could not determine whether that darkened area on his scalp was due to bruising from blood or due to decomposition changes.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. And again, there was 3 healing wounds. The ribs 6 and 7, correct?
Yes.
And the 2-inch skull fracture on the right side, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The other wounds show no signs of healing.
Correct.
They weren't caused by going down the well, were they?
I don't believe that they were caused by going into the well due to the numerous layers and layers of duct tape and plastic that had him somewhat cocooned into this structure, and the lack of any type of tearing of the plastic or his sleeper.
Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Brown. So his injuries, again, occurred either shortly before death or at death, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Again, homicidal violence, correct?
correct.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stratton. Ms. Scott, you may cross-examine.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I left something. So we're talking about several distinct areas of injury, is that correct?
Yes,
Onto the child's body, correct?
yes,
There are 2 areas that did show some signs of healing, correct?
yes,
One being a skull fracture,
yes,
and there was 2 ribs that were injured, correct?
correct.
Okay. We'll just take them one at a time. The rib fractures, are you able to estimate how long prior to you viewing the body, or how long prior to his death, those were injured?
So in terms of just being able to give you a number, it really is not that precise. Everybody is a little bit different in their healing process. So no, I can't give you an exact time.
Okay. Do you know can you narrow it down in regards to days or weeks?
I wouldn't be able to narrow it down any further than, yes, it would have to be days to weeks.
Days to weeks,
Mhm.
okay. And the type of injury to his chest, were you able to tell how it would have appeared when it was injured? Would it have had some type of bruising or some type of outward signs to indicate there was that injury to the inside of the body?
Well, it's possible there was bruising, but without being able, to examine him at that time.
Okay.
I can't tell you positively, but it's possible there was bruising on the outside.
Possible there was bruising,
Mhm.
but there may not have been any bruising or swelling.
Well, I don't know, but yes, there's possibility
Okay.
that there would have been bruising.
What about swelling?
That's possible.
But there's also a possibility that there was not any swelling.
Sure.
Okay, so there may not have been any outward signs on the skin, outward skin, that would indicate that there were ribs that were fractured underneath of it, correct?
The outward sign would have been his behavior.
Right. But possibly crying from pain.
Rib fractures are painful
Sure.
because they're going to hurt every time you breathe. Whenever you breathe, your chest cavity moves in and out, and that's going to hurt.
Right. But at some point in time, that pain would start to subside, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And once again, there may not have been any outward signs of that type of trauma, correct?
on the skin.
Thank you. In regards to that fracture that had begun to heal on the top of his skull, and I believe it's on the right side, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did that indicate that there was any type of crushing injury to the skull?
Well, it's some kind of blunt force trauma.
Right. Could have been caused by a fall?
Hitting either an object or something hitting his head, or his head hitting an object of some sort.
So whether something either landed on him or he landed on something, that's what caused that injury, correct?
Yeah, some kind of blunt force trauma.
Okay. And that could have been the result of an accident?
I don't know how it happened.
You can't say, but I'm just saying it's possible that it was caused by an accident.
Sure.
I know we're open to all realms of possibility here.
Sure.
But you do not have any definitive evidence any source of information that would tell you one way or the other whether it was an accident or whether it was intentional, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We did hear from his pediatrician yesterday, Dr. Hudson, and he indicated that sometimes with skull fractures, there's signs of bruising and swelling, and sometimes there's not. Would you hold that same opinion?
Sure.
Okay. So even with this type of injury, whether something landed on him or he landed on something else, there may not have been any outward signs of that type of trauma, correct?
The same answer, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Other than maybe behavior, the baby would probably not be acting normally.
Okay. And he could have been crying,
Yes.
but at some point in time, that would have subsisted and the healing process began, correct?
Sure.
Okay. And that could have occurred in as little as a few days, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In regards to the other injuries, I believe that you've already stated now on at least 2 occasions, those injuries either occurred at the time of death, simultaneously to death, shortly prior to death, because your conclusion is that they showed no signs of healing, correct?
Right.
Okay. Is there anything to indicate, or is there anything that you're able to draw any conclusion from that those injuries would have occurred from more than one person causing them?
I can't say by looking at the injuries.
Okay, thank you. And it is not in necessarily your job description to ascertain who caused those injuries, correct?
Correct.
Just that they were caused, correct?
Yes.
When they were caused, correct?
Yes.
And that they may be the source of this child's death, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I do believe that it is also your conclusion that you do not have an opinion that this child was alive at the time it was placed in those crates and put down the well, correct?
Yes, again, that speaks to drowning. And
I'm sorry?
That speaks to drowning. And
Correct.
drowning is a diagnosis of exclusion, so I cannot tell you that he drowned.
Okay. That's why I just want to make
Yes.
clear that it is not your opinion that he was alive and he drowned when going into the well, correct?
Correct.
It would be your opinion that he was no longer breathing and did not take any water in, which would have caused him to drown as a result of going in that well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Over what period of time, if you're able to say, would a bruise be created? Like the bruise that you talked about on baby Dylan's head from his brow ridge to the back of his skull. Do you know what time period it would take to form such a bruise?
Well, you can't date a bruise by looking at there is not an accurate way to date a bruise by looking at the color changes that you see on a bruise.
Okay. So that bruise could have occurred, or the blood pooling in that area could have occurred very close to his time of death, correct?
That's possible.
Okay. It did not necessarily occur over a period of hours or days or weeks.
I can't tell you how long the bruise was there.
Okay, but I'm just saying there's no testimony that you can give in regards to that period of time, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Also, in regards to that bruising that was associated with his right chest injury, would that be the same conclusion you would draw as well?
Yes, I can't date the bruise.
Okay. Or how long it took to appear? correct?
Correct.
Also, in regards to the bruising on the leg associated with that leg break, is that also your same testimony?
Yes.
There's no time frame that you can put on that appearance, correct?
Correct.
In your direct examination, you testified that when brain matter typically liquefies in the decomposition process, it would be gray or green, correct?
Yes.
And in this matter, it was pink, correct?
Yes.
And you believe that that pink was caused by blood, correct?
Yes.
But I also believe that you said that there may be other reasons for it to be pink, or did I misunderstand you? That that wasn't the only reason for it to be pink?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, well, that's why I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
That would be your reasoning for it to be pink.
Yes.
And that would be associated with that darkening of the scalp that we saw,
It's possible.
and potentially from the skull fracture we saw towards the back of the head on the left side, correct?
Yes.
And those are all things that you cannot date as to the spreading of that bruise, the causation of that bruise, or when that blood appeared, correct? Close in time to his death.
With the bruise, no.
Okay. Did any of the items that were inside the crate, which we saw, I believe that you said there were approximately 18 stones located in there, is that correct?
Yes.
In that iron object, is that correct?
Yes.
Were any of those a cause of these fractures?
I don't know.
Okay. You're not able to say?
No, it's due to blunt force trauma of some kind, but I'm not able to say.
And you're not actually able to say if they were caused prior to or after going into the well, but it's your belief that they were caused not as a result of going into the well?
Which injuries?
The arm fractures and the leg fracture and the chest fracture that was not healing and the skull fracture that was not healing.
So I can't specifically date those because there are no signs of healing. My opinion is that they likely happened at the time of death and likely not due to after death being dropped into the well.
Also, in regards to the toxicology, you do not know the source of the drugs that were found in the liver, correct?
Correct.
You were able to rule out that he was given any medication that would be associated with those tests, correct?
Yes.
But you're also not able to draw any conclusion from the information that you received if he ingested those by means of someone administering those to him. You're not able to say who did that, correct?
I'm not able to say who did it. He certainly didn't do it.
I
But yes,
understand
I'm not able to say who did it.
At that age, he's not probably putting things of his own accord into his own mouth without
Right.
assistance. But you would not be able to say if that was assisted by an adult or one of his parents. You're not able to say who did that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Are you able to say when those would have been ingested?
No.
Okay. When a body is decomposing, does it often lose mass?
Yes, it can.
So the weight that you determined his body to be in, which is slightly over 4 pounds, would that be atypical in a situation where a body close in that time was weighed when he was alive, that he would weigh less after he decomposed for a portion of time?
It's certainly possible to lose weight because your organs are losing some weight. So yes, it's certainly possible to lose weight.
So the weight isn't necessarily accounted to any type of intentional act or abuse on behalf of the caregiver. It could be accounted for through the decomposition process.
I don't know what he weighed at the time of his death, but you could certainly lose weight during decomposition.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to your autopsy report, do you still have that in front of you? Did you take that back? Do you have that? in
I
front of
have
you?
one.
Oh, okay, you have your own personal copy. Okay, thank you. Do you want her? Your Honor, may I approach? Just so she uses the marked exhibit. I'm going to hand you what was marked as State's Exhibit number 36. You did an overall exam of Dylan's body, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the outward appearance of his body, did you perform you performed an external examination, and you have that as part of your report, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. On what would, I believe, be your page 3, marked at the bottom. If you could turn to that section, please,
Okay.
labeled external examination. Do you have that page?
Yes.
Okay. Could you read that first line for me there?
The body is that the line?
That's the
Yes.
line I'm asking.
The body is that of a well-developed, well-nourished white male infant who has a weight of 1,226 grams, a crown to heel length of 20.5 inches, a crown to rump length of 14 inches, a head circumference of 15.5 inches, a chest circumference of 14 inches, an abdominal circumference of 14 inches, and a foot length of 3 inches.
Okay, thank you. So your external examination of this body, other than the fractures that you uncovered and the bruising that you uncovered, he was a well-developed, well-nourished white male infant, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, if I can have just a minute. Do you have any knowledge, or as part of your education or experience, are you able to date how fast an infant grows?
You probably would, probably a pediatrician would be better suited to answer that question.
Okay. I guess I was just, do you know how long he would be, like what is there any type of rough guideline?
Well, there are growth charts.
Your Honor, when this answer to pediatrician would be more appropriate to answer these questions.
She believes she can give an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty as to that issue. I'm going to sustain the objection.
Your Honor, I believe that she testified that she is trained in anatomy.
She said a pediatrician would be more appropriate, so unless you can lay a foundation that she can give that kind of opinion.
Well, may I have an opportunity to try to lay that foundation?
Briefly.
Okay, thank you. Have you studied the field of anatomy?
I'm sorry?
Have you studied the field of anatomy?
Yes.
Okay. Have you studied or had any education or training in how bones grow and their ability to grow and how they grow, what causes them to grow or not to grow?
Through
Lack of better words.
through medical school, yes.
Okay. In your duties as a coroner, do you take into consideration length, weight, other measurements in regards to bone length and what length they are whenever you're examining in a body?
Not bone length, but certainly we're weighing and measuring each person that comes through the coroner's office. But it isn't something that we would do on a regular basis, as a pediatrician would every time you see a child come in and you're tracking this one child and can follow his or her growth and development.
Okay.
So that isn't really something that we're doing at the coroner's office.
If you had a measurement of this child in February of 2019,
Objection, Your Honor.
The rest of the question.
if you had a length measurement of this child in February of 2019, and knowing the length of the baby's body when you received him into your office, could you tell if the baby had grown and how possibly when his life would have ended and he stopped growing from that previous measurement to your measurement?
No.
Okay. I appreciate your answer. Okay. Your Honor, if I can have just a moment. Your Honor, at this time I do not have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Any redirect?
Just a few, Your Honor.
Doctor, you were asked on cross-examination about the substances that were detected in toxicology. Is it your medical opinion that those substances could have been detected in his liver and could have stayed there from birth?
No, not that long. So anytime you, whatever way you ingest something, your body will break down that substance. Any kind of a drug, even a drug you're getting from your doctor, your body will break down that substance until eventually the substance is gone. And so it wouldn't still be in his system from birth.
So he would have had to have been exposed at some other time,
Yes,
not in utero, for this to show up in his liver.
yes.
Okay. You were asked about, and I'm not sure it was that clear, but rocks causing these injuries. And you said yes. Do you mean rocks caused these injuries as it went into the well, or you could use a rock to cause these injuries?
I meant that you could use a rock to cause these injuries.
So if someone bashed baby Dylan in the head with one of these rocks, it would result in the skull fracture, possibly.
Yes.
You were asked about skull fractures being accidental. And I think you already said a 2-month-old baby could not have an accident himself that would result in these fractures. Is that right?
You would have to present the scenario to me.
In other words,
but he's not playing.
walking
Yes.
or playing.
Yes.
Okay. Do the types of fractures or the fact that he has fractures to his ribs at 2 months old indicate anything to you?
He has been subjected to some kind of trauma.
Okay. Are there fractures that you would say are typical in child abuse situations that you see more commonly than others?
Well, there shouldn't ever be any types of fractures. But certainly as, kids get older and become toddlers, then they would be in a situation where, much more likely to have an accidental fracture of some kind, but a 2-month-old does not fall into that category.
Okay. And it was sort of isolating injuries, but the rib fractures, you said those fractures occurred, you can't date them, but can you say whether or not they would have occurred first or last based on the signs of healing?
Compared to all of the other fractures, they would have occurred first just based on signs of healing.
Okay. And then what would have occurred next?
The other fracture that he has that shows any signs of healing at all, which is the right skull fracture.
The 2-inch fracture.
Yes.
Okay. And then lastly would be the remaining fractures of the arm, leg, and skull, the 1-inch fracture.
That's right.
So are you telling this jury it is your opinion that these were at least 3 different incidents?
Yes.
You were asked about drowning. Can you exclude drowning based on what your examination is?
I can't exclude drowning, but I can't include it either because you don't have a specific sign. There is not a specific pathognomonic sign that somebody has when they drowned.
So if you received the body and there were none of these other injuries, fractures and bruising, would you then say that he had probably drowned?
It certainly would be more possible that he had drowned, yes.
Okay. So what you're telling this jury in here is you can't say either way.
Yes.
Okay. But what you do have evidence of is all of this homicidal violence.
Yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Mr. Stratton, any recross?
Yeah, just Dr. Brown, not to beat a dead horse here, but I just want to ask you a question about this. Dr. Hudson, who is Dylan's pediatrician, testified earlier that on 2/7 that he weighed 7 pounds 2 ounces and that he was 19.5 inches long. Then on February 21st, he said Dylan was 7 pounds 15 ounces, 20.3 inches long. The date of your autopsy is when?
June 13th.
June 13th. You said he weighed 4 pounds 8 ounces, correct?
Yes.
And you said he was 20.5 inches long, correct?
Yes.
Would you be surprised if his date of death is March 28th based upon...
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach the bench?
Raise your question, Mr. Stratton.
Again, Dr. Brown, you said on 6/12 he weighed 4 pounds 8 ounces and was 20.5 inches long, correct?
Yes.
Get back where we were.
Uh-huh.
And that Dr. Hudson had testified on 2/21 that he weighed 7 pounds 15 ounces and 20.3 inches long. Would that be consistent, or would you be surprised if the date of death was closer to 2/21 or closer to 6/12?
I can't use his weight to determine his date of death.
What about his length?
I can't use
Another answer. Ma'am, what was your answer?
I can't use his length either to determine the date of his death.
Right.
Thanks, Your Honor. No further questions.
Scott, any other recross?
I do briefly, Your Honor.
Dr. Brown,
It is not your opinion here today that baby Dylan drowned, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. You do not have the opinion that the baby was alive prior to being placed in that water, do you?
I do not.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Ms. Scott?
No questions. Thank you.
Is this witness excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
When is this excused?
Doctor, thank you for your time. You're free to go. Counsel approach. Gentlemen, this would be a good time to take our lunch recess. Remember my earlier admonition to you, do not discuss this case amongst yourselves or discuss it with anyone else. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your duty not to form or express an opinion on this case until it's finally submitted to you. I'm going to have you be back in the jury room at 1:45, and we'll plan on starting at 10:01, or as close to that as we can. Court is recessed.